The crystalline spires of the Vorthak Empire pierced the violet sky of Zerion Prime like frozen lightning, their surfaces humming with the psychic energy that powered the greatest civilization in the Andromeda Spiral. Within the highest tower, King Varric stood before the vast viewing portal, his 6-foot frame rigid with barely contained fury. His pale blue skin, marked with the intricate silver tattoos of royal lineage, seemed to glow with inner fire as his telepathic aura pulsed with agitation. 23 years, he growled to his chief advisor, General Thane. 23 years of shame hidden in the upper chambers. In the medical wing, far above, Princess Kira lay motionless on her floating bed, her own pale blue skin unmarked by any tattoos of achievement or power. Born during a violent solar storm that had disrupted the planet's natural psychic fields, she had emerged into the world with her nervous system damaged, her legs forever still, her mind unable to touch the telepathic network that connected all. Vorthak society. In a culture where mental dominance meant everything, she was nothing. A breathing reminder of imperfection in a bloodline that had ruled for millennia. The king's decision had been brewing for months. "Bring me the human," he commanded. Deep in the mining shafts beneath the capital, Ethan wiped sweat and crystalline dust from his brow. 3 years since the Vorthak raiders had torn him from his engineering job on Europa Station. 3 years of backbreaking labor, extracting the psychic crystals that powered their empire. His brown hair had grown long and unkempt, his once soft hands now calloused and scarred, but his green eyes still held the spark of intelligence that no amount of slavery could extinguish. The summons came as a shock. Slaves were never brought before royalty, unless they were about to be executed for some imagined slight. Flanked by guards whose telepathic shields felt like ice against his mind, Ethan was marched through corridors of impossible beauty, walls that shifted color with the emotions of their inhabitants, floors that absorbed footsteps to create perfect silence, air that tasted of exotic spices and ozone. The throne room took his breath away. King Varric sat upon a seat, carved from a single massive crystal, his presence overwhelming even without direct telepathic contact. Behind him, the viewing portal showed the sprawling city below, where millions of Vorthak went about their daily lives in a harmony of connected minds that Ethan could never truly understand. "Human," the king's voice resonated with power. "You have served adequately in the mines. Today you receive a gift." The great doors whispered open, and Ethan's world shifted. 4 servants carried in an anti-gravity stretcher, and upon it lay the most beautiful being he had ever seen. Despite her obvious paralysis, despite the way she was being presented like discarded furniture, Princess Kira possessed an ethereal grace that made his heart race. Her long silver hair cascaded over the stretcher's edges like liquid moonlight, and when her violet eyes met his, he saw not weakness, but a profound sadness that cut straight to his soul. "This defective offspring has proven useless to the Empire," King Varric continued, his words dripping with disdain. "Perhaps a lower life form can find some purpose for broken goods. Take her, feed her, keep her alive. Consider it a reward for your years of adequate service." The casual cruelty of it stunned Ethan into momentary silence. This was a princess, the king's own daughter, being given away like trash. But as he looked at Kira's face, he saw something that made his engineers mind race with possibility, not brokenness, but untapped potential waiting for someone who cared enough to nurture it. I accept the responsibility, Your Majesty," Ethan managed, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. As the servants transferred Kira's stretcher to his custody, their eyes met again. This time he thought he saw the faintest glimmer of hope flicker in those violet depths. Neither of them knew that this moment, this casual disposal of an unwanted princess, would become the catalyst that would reshape both their worlds forever. The slave quarters beneath the crystal spires were a stark contrast to the palace's grandeur. Rough-hewn stone walls, dim lighting, and the constant hum of machinery. Ethan had cleared his small chamber of mining equipment to make room for Kira's medical bed, the anti-gravity unit looking absurdly advanced in the crude surroundings. For the first 3 days, Kira said nothing. She lay perfectly still, her violet eyes tracking his movements as he went about the careful business of caring for her. Ethan had learned basic Vorthak physiology during his captivity. Their metabolism was slower than humans, their dietary needs different. But he approached each task with the methodical precision of his engineering background. "You don't have to do this," Kira finally whispered on the 4th morning as Ethan gently helped her sit up to eat. Her voice was melodic, tinged with the harmonic undertones that all Vorthak possessed. But there was something fragile about it, as if she expected him to abandon her at any moment. "Yes, I do," Ethan replied softly, holding a cup of nutrient broth to her lips. "Not because your father commanded it, but because it's right." The concept seemed foreign to her. "Right?" she echoed, confusion flickering across her delicate features. "On Earth we have a saying, all people deserve dignity regardless of their circumstances." He set the cup aside and met her gaze. "You're not broken, Kira. You're just different." Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the wall of resignation she'd built around herself. "You speak my name strangely," she said, the faintest hint of curiosity in her voice. "How should I say it? No one has spoken my name with kindness in many years." The admission broke something in Ethan's chest. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and touched her hand. Her skin was cool, softer than silk, and he felt a tiny tremor run through her at the contact. "Then I'll say it with kindness every day," he promised. As the weeks passed, Ethan threw himself into a project that consumed his every spare moment. Using salvaged parts from the mining equipment, servo motors, power cells, lightweight alloys, he began constructing something that had never existed in Vorthak society, a mobility aid. Their technology was so focused on mental domination that they'd never considered mechanical solutions for physical limitations. Kira watched his work with growing fascination. "What is that?" she asked one evening as he calibrated a gyroscopic stabilizer. "Freedom," he said simply. "Or at least the beginning of it." Their conversations had grown longer, more intimate. Ethan told her about Earth, about rain and oceans, about cities that sprawled across continents, about humanity's stubborn refusal to let obstacles define them. In return, Kira shared fragments of her life, the loneliness of her tower prison, the weight of her father's disappointment, the dreams she'd harbored of somehow finding her place in a world that had no room for her. "I used to imagine I could fly," she confided one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before I understood what I was, I would dream of soaring above the crystal spires, free from this body that betrays me." "Maybe you still can," Ethan said, his fingers working to adjust the exosuit's neural interface, "just not the way you imagined." The night he finished the mobility suit, Ethan could barely contain his excitement. The device was crude by Earth standards, but revolutionary for Zerion Prime, a powered exoskeleton that would support Kira's legs and translate her upper body movements into locomotion. "Are you ready?" he asked, helping her into the harness. Kira's hands trembled as she gripped the control surfaces. "What if it doesn't work? What if I'm too broken even for this?" "Then we'll try again," Ethan said firmly. "And again, until we get it right." The first step was tentative, the servo motors whirring softly as they responded to her commands. The second was stronger. By the third, tears were streaming down Kira's face as she took her first independent steps in 23 years. "I'm walking," she whispered, wonder suffusing her voice. "Ethan, I'm walking." She turned to face him, her movement still uncertain, but undeniably her own, and Ethan felt his heart swell with a joy he hadn't experienced since his capture. But it was the look in her eyes, pure, radiant gratitude mixed with something deeper, that made him realize his feelings for her had evolved far beyond mere compassion. "Thank you," she breathed, reaching out to touch his face with shaking fingers. "For seeing me, for believing in me." "Kira," he began, but she silenced him by pressing closer, their faces inches apart. "No one has ever given me a gift like this," she whispered. "No one has ever." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility, until Ethan closed the distance and kissed her gently. It was soft, tentative, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, her lips moving against his with sweet uncertainty, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. 3 months had passed since Kira took her first steps in the mobility suit, and the transformation was remarkable. No longer confined to her bed, she explored every corner of the slave quarters with the wonder of someone discovering the world for the first time. Ethan had made improvements to the exoskeleton, quieter motors, better balance algorithms, even decorative elements that made it less medical device and more elegant enhancement. But the real changes were in Kira herself. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something Ethan could only describe as awakening. She laughed now, a sound like crystalline bells that made his heart race every time he heard it. More importantly, she had begun to hope. "Show me the stars again," she requested one evening, settling beside him on the observation platform he'd built on the quarter's roof. The mobility suit folded gracefully as she sat, its adaptive systems responding to her needs without conscious thought. Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close as they gazed up at the alien constellations. "That cluster there," he pointed, "reminds me of Earth's Pleiades. We called them the 7 Sisters." "Tell me about sisters," Kira said softly. "I never had any." "They're supposed to be there for you, no matter what. To support you, challenge you, love you unconditionally." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Like we are for each other." She turned in his arms, her violet eyes searching his face. "Is that what this is? Love?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ethan had been avoiding that word, knowing the complications it would bring. But looking at her now, beautiful, brave, and utterly trusting, he couldn't deny the truth any longer. "Yes," he whispered, "I love you, Kira. Against all reason, despite every obstacle, I love you." Her smile was radiant. "I love you too." I didn't know what it was called, this feeling, but it's been growing stronger every day. Their kiss was different. This time, deeper, more certain. When they broke apart, Kira's breathing was unsteady, her cheeks flushed with desire. "I want to be with you," she said, her voice barely audible. "Completely. But I don't know. I've never—" "Neither have I," Ethan admitted. "Not like this, not with someone who matters so much." He carried her to his bed, their bed now, with infinite gentleness, the mobility suit disengaging as he laid her down. In the soft glow of the crystal lighting, every touch was reverent, every kiss a promise. Ethan mapped the constellations, of silver freckles across her pale skin, marveling at her beauty while she explored the scars and calluses that told the story of his captivity. Their lovemaking was tender, patient, filled with whispered endearments and gentle laughter. When Kira gasped his name, her body trembling beneath his, Ethan felt complete in a way he'd never imagined possible. They moved together like they were meant to fit, 2 broken pieces finally made whole. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the afterglow, Kira traced patterns on his chest with her fingertips. "I feel different," she murmured, "stronger, as if something inside me is stirring." Ethan had noticed it too, Subtle changes in the way she moved, moments when her eyes seemed to glow with inner light. "Your father said you couldn't access your psychic abilities," he said carefully. "That's what everyone believed. But what if they were wrong? What if I just needed the right catalyst?" She looked up at him, wonder and fear warring in her expression. "What if I needed to feel truly alive first?" Before Ethan could respond, a low harmonic hum filled the air, the sound of approaching Vorthak guards. They scrambled to dress as footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. "Princess Kira," the voice belonged to General Thane, the king's chief advisor. "Your father requests your presence." Kira's face went pale, but she activated her mobility suit and stood with newfound confidence. "Tell my father, I'll come when I'm ready." The silence that followed was deafening. Slaves didn't make demands. Discarded princesses certainly didn't. But when Kira emerged from the chamber, her bearing was regal, her head held high. "You seem different," General Thane observed, his telepathic probes meeting unexpected resistance. "I am different," Kira replied, taking Ethan's hand without hesitation. "I've remembered who I am." As they walked toward the throne room, Ethan felt the change in her, a subtle shift in the air around them, as if reality itself was responding to her presence. Whatever power had been dormant within her was awakening, and he suspected their love had been the key that unlocked it. The real question was, what would they do with that power now? King Varek's fury was a tangible force in the throne room, his psychic aura crackling with barely contained rage. The assembled court cowered before him as he paced, his silver tattoos glowing with agitation. "Explain to me," he snarled at General Thane, "how my defective daughter has suddenly developed the ability to shield her thoughts from our scans. The human's influence appears to be significant, Your Majesty," Thane replied carefully. "Perhaps we underestimated the therapeutic value of companionship." "Companionship!" Varek's voice rose to a roar. "She's bedding a slave. The royal bloodline is being contaminated by inferior genetics." But even as he raged, Varek was troubled by the reports. Kira's psychic signature had indeed changed, not just strengthened, but transformed into something entirely new. Where traditional Vorthak telepathy was based on domination and control, hers seemed to radiate empathy and connection. It was an abomination of everything their society stood for. In the slave quarters, Kira was discovering the extent of her new abilities. She could sense the emotions of everyone around her. Not just read their thoughts, but feel their pain, their hopes, their fears. The experience was overwhelming until Ethan taught her meditation techniques he'd learned during his engineering training. "Focus on my voice," he said, his hands steady on her shoulders as she trembled with psychic overload. "Build walls in your mind. Protect yourself first, then reach out." "I can feel them all," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The other slaves, they're suffering. How did I never know?" "Because you were isolated," Ethan said gently. "Your father made sure of that. But now you can help them." Kira's first act of rebellion was small, but significant. Jorik, an elderly Terran slave who'd been injured in a mining accident, was scheduled for termination rather than medical treatment. When the disposal team arrived, they found Kira standing guard over him, her psychic field creating a barrier. They couldn't penetrate. "Stand aside, Princess," the lead guard commanded. "This does not concern you." "Everything in this place concerns me," Kira replied, her voice carrying new authority. "This man will receive medical treatment. He's just a slave. He's a person." The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Kira's power manifested. "And I will not allow him to die." The guards retreated, uncertain how to handle a princess who had suddenly developed not just psychic abilities, but the will to use them. Word spread quickly through both the slave quarters and the upper levels of the palace. Princess Kira was no longer the helpless invalid they remembered. The confrontation with her father was inevitable. When Varek summoned her to the throne room, Kira went willingly but not alone. Ethan walked beside her, his presence a source of strength she drew upon. "You have overstepped your bounds," Varek declared, his psychic pressure crushing down on them both. "I gave you to the human as a kindness, not as a license to disrupt the natural order." "The natural order?" Kira's laugh was bitter. "You mean the order where you dispose of your own daughter like garbage? You were useless, broken, a shame upon our lineage." I was alone. Kira's power flared, and for the first time in his life, King Varek felt his own psychic dominance challenged. "I was dying in that tower, and you never once tried to help me." "Heal!" The assembled court gasped as Kira's abilities manifested fully. Unlike their mental domination, her power felt like warm sunlight, inviting rather than commanding. Several courtiers found themselves swaying toward her, drawn by the empathy that radiated from her being. "This ends now," Varek declared, gesturing. "To his guards, seize the human, execute him for corrupting royal blood. No!" Kira's cry of anguish unleashed a psychic shockwave that sent the guards staggering. But it did more than that. It touched every mind in the palace, carrying with it the pure emotion of love and loss that drove her. For the first time, the rigid hierarchy of Vorthak society wavered. Slaves throughout the complex felt her call and began to move, not with the shuffling gait of the oppressed, but with purpose. Guards found their certainty shaken as they experienced genuine empathy for the beings they'd been trained to see as property. In the throne room, Ethan stepped forward, his own courage bolstered by their connection. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady despite the danger, "your daughter has shown me something beautiful, the possibility of a world where strength comes from connection, not domination. You can kill me, but you can't kill that idea." "Watch me," Varek snarled, raising his hand to deliver a killing blow, but before he could strike, alarms began wailing throughout the palace. In the mines, the foundries, the service corridors, everywhere. Humans and other enslaved species toiled. The revolution had begun. Kira's psychic call had awakened something that had been dormant for too long, the desire for freedom. "It's too late, Father," Kira said, her voice calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "The old order is ending. The question is whether you'll be part of building something better, or if you'll be swept away by the tide of change." As the sounds of rebellion echoed through the crystal spires, Ethan and Kira stood together, their love having sparked something neither of them had anticipated, a revolution that would transform not just their world, but their entire understanding of what it meant to be alive. The battle for Zerion Prime raged for 7 days and 7 nights, but it was unlike any conflict in Vorthak history. Instead of the brutal domination that had characterized their conquests, this was a revolution of consciousness, minds opening to possibilities they'd never imagined. Kira stood at the center of it all, her psychic abilities now fully awakened and refined through love. From the command center they'd established in the old mining complex, she reached out to every corner of the planet, her empathic field offering hope to the oppressed and doubt to the oppressors. "Status report," Ethan called out, his engineering background proving invaluable in coordinating the rebellion's technical aspects. "Sectors 7 through 12 have declared for the revolution," reported Jorik, the elderly Terran whose rescue had been Kira's first act of defiance. "The garrison at Crystal Falls has surrendered without firing a shot." It was the pattern throughout the uprising. When faced with Kira's psychic influence, not the crushing mental domination they expected, but waves of genuine compassion and possibility, many Vorthak soldiers simply laid down their weapons. For the first time in their lives, they were experiencing what it meant to feel rather than simply conquer. "My lady," A young Vorthak approached hesitantly, still unsure of his place in this new order. King Varek has barricaded himself in the palace. His remaining forces are preparing for a final stand. Kira closed her eyes, extending her consciousness toward the crystal spires where she'd spent so many years in isolation. She could feel her father's rage, but beneath it something else: fear, loneliness, and the desperate need to maintain control in a world that was rapidly changing beyond his understanding. "We end this today," she said, taking Ethan's hand. "But not with violence, with truth." The final confrontation took place in the throne room where Kira's journey had begun. King Varek waited with his elite guard, their psychic shields locked in place, their weapons charged. But as Kira entered, walking proudly in her mobility suit, Ethan at her side, something unexpected happened. "You have destroyed everything," Varek accused, his voice hollow with defeat. "Millennia of order, of strength, of purpose." "I've destroyed nothing but lies," Kira replied, her psychic field radiating calm certainty. "The strength you speak of was built on the suffering of others. The order you cherish was chaos for everyone beneath you. They are inferior beings. They exist to serve. They are people, Father. Just like us, just like me, the daughter you threw away because she didn't fit your narrow definition of perfection." Kira's power reached out, not to dominate, but to share. For the first time in his life, King Varek experienced the world through someone else's perspective, felt the pain of the slaves in the mines, the loneliness of the forgotten, the joy of connection that came from treating others with dignity. The psychic shock staggered him. What have you done to me?" "I've shown you the truth," Kira said gently. "The same truth Ethan showed me, that love is stronger than fear, that connection is more powerful than control." One by one, the elite guards lowered their weapons as Kira's influence spread. They were feeling, perhaps for the first time, the full spectrum of emotions that their society had trained them to suppress. "This is weakness," Varek whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. "This is strength," Ethan countered, stepping forward. "The strength to admit when you're wrong, to change, to grow. Your daughter has shown me that evolution isn't about becoming stronger than others. It's about becoming better than who you were yesterday." The revolution ended not with conquest, but with transformation. In the weeks that followed, Kira and Ethan worked tirelessly to establish a new government based on equality and mutual respect. The rigid caste system was dismantled, replaced by councils where every voice, human, Vorthak, and the dozen other species that called Zerion Prime home, could be heard. King Varek, stripped of his title but not his life, struggled to understand this new world. In a moment of private conversation with his daughter, he asked, "Do you forgive me?" "I forgive you," Kira replied, "but more importantly, I choose not to let your mistakes define either of us. We both have the chance to be better." Now, 6 months after the revolution, Kira and Ethan stood before the assembled people of Zerion Prime to be joined in marriage. The ceremony blended traditions from both their cultures, human vows of love and commitment, Vorthak rituals of mental bonding and shared purpose. "Today," Kira said to the crowd, her voice carrying to every corner of the plaza, "we celebrate not just the union of two people, but the birth of a new way of being. We choose connection over domination, love over fear, hope over despair." As they kissed, sealing their bond before their people, a wave of pure joy rippled out from them, Kira's psychic abilities amplifying the emotion until every person present felt it. For a moment, the entire planet seemed to pulse with the same rhythm, the same hope for a future built on the radical idea that everyone deserved dignity, respect, and love. In the years that followed, their story became legend, not just on Zerion Prime, but throughout the galaxy. the tale of the forsaken princess and the human slave who dared to love each other, and in doing so, changed the course of civilizations. They ruled together, Kira's empathic abilities balanced by Ethan's practical wisdom, their love serving as the foundation for a new kind of society. And in the crystal spires that once housed only the elite, children of all species played together, learning that the greatest strength wasn't in dominating others, but in lifting each other up. The revolution of hearts was complete, and the galaxy would never be the same.